Hey there, sweet peas. Welcome back to Friendless. I'm your host, James Avramenko, and this week I'm catching up with Brett Cassidy. Brett is a singer, songwriter, producer, and all-around genuinely great human being who I knew back in Calgary, and we had an absolutely delightful conversation. We discussed the power of authentic vulnerability in both art and relationships, the healing potential of giving second chances, but maybe not third, attending the church of rock and roll, and the importance of letting yourself hope. So now it's time to lean back, get comfy, set your volume at a reasonable level, and enjoy my interview with Brett Cassidy here on Friendless. This week on Friendless, I am welcoming to the show someone who I met incredibly randomly years ago and have only had the opportunity to kind of watch his career just sort of like flourish and progress just through the internet. He's a singer, a songwriter, he's a producer, and he is an actual nice guy, not one of those internet nice guys. The one and only Brett Cassidy. How are you today?
Real good. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. We've been trying to get you. We've been trying to kind of make this work for months now, and it's super exciting that we finally found a mutual time to record.
Yeah.
Um,
And I've been
um,
waiting even longer to be asked to join. So
well, that's just it, right? Yeah, we were talking just before recording. You've been kind of watching me whittle down the Facebook list, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that kind of piece of the show has definitely been more dormant than usual. Like because we reconnected, funny enough, through TikTok. I don't know if it was you saw my video or I saw your video, and one of us messaged the other, and so it wasn't even a Facebook thing that ended up actually setting the real domino effect off.
Yeah,
Um,
we've kept up to date with the social trends. No more Facebook. We've moved on to TikTok.
that's just it. It's dead. Fuck though, man. I had a real come to Jesus moment the other day where I was realizing when I started this show, I was already so deeply overwhelmed by the thought that I had been on Facebook for, I think at the time it was like a little over a decade. It was like, something 12 years, something like that. And now 7, 8 years later, I'm pushing having been on that platform for somewhere in the range of 20 years. And that really does my head in, because now I've had Facebook active longer than not only all of grade school, but all of like my university plus change,
Mhm.
and that really yeah, linear time is really a motherfucker.
It's always strange to get hit with those like memories from 16 years ago.
Yes.
Like who is that person that I'm looking at?
100%. I feel like there's no one who's a bigger stranger to me than who I was online a couple of years ago. Let alone, yeah, you look back 15 years ago, that's a stranger. That is a different human being that I have no connection to whatsoever. So I want to really talk. Mostly, I want to talk about your music career, but I think to kind of get us there, we have to double back a little bit. So I think for listeners who aren't necessarily familiar with you and the work you do, um, I'll put to you a very blunt question of who the hell are you?
Yeah, it's a big question. So who I am musically, I recently, only over the last few years, have been making and releasing music under my own name, coming from like a decade of always being guy in band or like writing songs as a collaborative experience and putting them out under various band names. And then during the pandemic, when we were all trapped in isolation by ourselves and I was very sad and had an acoustic guitar, kind of went back to my roots and love of folk and country music and wrote a bunch of songs with the idea that I would be able to play and record them myself. And in that time, I was also getting really into music production and started learning that all that world of things, which took quite a bit of time. And then finally, last year, I was able to put out my first EP, which is really a collection of all of the sounds that inspire me. First and foremost is like folk music has been my love for my whole life. in junior high when everyone else was listening to My Chemical Romance. I was in the back of the classroom listening to John Denver.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. And I've been kind of on the reverse path. I always see there's like a punk to country pipeline, and I'm like,
Yeah.
now after turning 30, I'm like, hey, have you guys heard of Joy Division? People are like, yes. Yes, Brett, we've heard of Joy Division. So I'm on the like country to punk pipeline, somewhere in the
Yeah.
middle there. And my other deep love is for psychedelic music. So I try to
Mhm.
really meet those, the folk and the psych, somewhere in a weird mishmash in the middle.
I love it. I love it. I love hearing that description of it, especially being familiar with your music, and especially that kind of. I don't know if you would call it sort of like the lead single off the EP or not, but it was the first song you released of that batch, "Friendship," and there's like a yodel in it,
Mhm.
and at the same time too, there is this like kind of experimental, very expansive. Uh, is it banjo that you're playing on that, or is it just guitar?
Yeah, there's the like main instrument is guitar, but there's
Hmm.
some banjo kind of throughout it, and then a bunch of layers of synthesizers and
Yeah.
lots of
It,
wacky stuff.
it does bring that, I think it's one of the things that I personally find so magic about what's happening right now with country and folk in general is that the sort of boundaries that have been so traditionally rigid are really breaking down, and it's allowing for a lot more experimentation and a lot more there's some really exciting work being done. Are you familiar with like Nick Shoulders and Sierra Farrell?
Those
um
are two of my absolute favorite artists.
Okay,
Yeah.
same, yeah. And they you were talking about the idea of like the punk to country pipeline, and I feel like
Mhm.
they're like the torchbearers of that movement,
Totally. Yeah.
and your music very much feels like it falls in line with that, which is a compliment, you know.
Appreciate it. Yeah, they're definitely huge inspirations.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, and I love seeing like all the cowboys with, you can tell they used to have plugs in their ears and now pull them out, but they still have the like stretched lobes, but now they just wear a cowboy hat, but still just covered in tattoos and
Yeah, yeah, it's the best. It's great.
mhm.
It's bringing back. It's almost like it's bringing back what tattoos used to represent.
Yeah.
Like tattoos used to be scary, and they're kind of not anymore, right? And
Mhm.
we're bringing back the make tattoos scary again, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you gotta look at someone covered in tattoos and be like, is that a dodgy character? Usually they're not though.
They're
They're
not
usually the kindest people.
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So continuing on that, I want to talk a little bit more about the sort of the origins of your music, because that feels like very much when we initially connected. We could tell the story about how we met, but I think in parallel with that was the band that you were in when we met, which was the Ashley 100.
Yeah,
And correct me if I'm wrong, there was a connection to the name of that band to the Revenant, right? Which is the movie set that we met on.
that is correct. Yeah, and that band is still active. We're still at it. We've been going on more than a
Amazing.
more than a decade now, which is wild to think about. We're working on a new album right now, which is really fun. Yeah, but
Amazing.
the Ashley 100, the name, which I will insert here, that I thought of the name before the Revenant movie.
100%. Yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah,
because when we met on set, you were already in the band, right? So it was like
yeah,
it was already done
yeah,
and dusted, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So that um, the Ashley 100 came from uh, William Ashley, who put together the group that inspired the Revenant. He was looking for 100 men to explore the Rocky Mountains, basically. And when we started as a band, we were really about like exploration sonically, and we live near the mountains in Calgary, and we're really into like exploring nature in that way. So it felt appropriate to have a name that reflected that. Uh, and then it's kind of one of those, band names are so weird because it's like 12 years later, uh, it's hard to associate the same meaning with the name that we started with, but it's kind of like this is what the name is now,
Yeah.
and it works, and that's what we are. So yeah, it was really funny when the opportunity came up to be an extra in The Revenant. and sometimes uh, manifestation works in strange ways.
Right, right. You technically became another one of the other Ashley Hundred, right?
Yeah,
You know, yeah.
exactly.
That's an interesting idea that you're raising though about like the naming of things, right? And that the way that names kind of anchor you to specific places in your life. And think often about the idea of like why do people give such like violent and vitriolic pushback to people taking ownership of their names or renaming themselves or whatever it might be. And I'd be curious about your take on the idea of like why couldn't a band just rename themselves again, right? Because it does sort of evoke an era, and what is this like social moray almost of like why we can't just rename ourselves because we're in a different period.
hmm And yeah, I feel like a lot of bands do do that, especially if they have like some member changes and things. Uh, I think the reason why I know the reason why we haven't is because it's just like it just feels like this is what our band is, and like
Mm,
if we were trying to entirely reinvent our sound or something, or
sure.
like swap some folks out, which I hope never happens. I want to be in this band until we all just keel over on stage or something. Um, it also having the name that I don't know if any of us feel super attached to anymore. It just shows like, is the name really important, or is the name just the thing that people use to refer? Like, I'm never upset when people don't remember my name. If we've met and had a conversation, and I'm like, a name is just what you yell at someone to get their attention.
Yeah.
For me, anyways, that's what it is. So like, if I hang out with someone and they don't remember my name, I don't care at all. As long as they remember, like, that's that person that we connected about this topic.
Yeah. It's an that's such an interesting point too, because the idea of like I'm somebody who has historically been atrocious with names. Faces, no problem. You know, if I have that experience that you're describing where I'll have met somebody and I could point out their face and remember it a decade later. I'd be like, oh, we talked at some point. You know,
Mm-hmm.
what your name is, gun to my head, no idea, right?
Yeah.
And internally, I know that doesn't uh there's no intended harm right, but at the same time too, as you said, like a name is the sound we've all agreed on to make to designate you right
Mm-hmm.
and
To talk shit behind their back. Just need
and
to
it's
know
like
someone's name so I can talk mad shit about them.
it has nothing a name actually has nothing to do with you. A name has everything to do with so I can gossip about you, right?
Exactly.
But it's just such a funny when you break it down like that, you realize what a silly thing it is, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of goofy that we care so much about these things, right? Because it's like
Absolutely.
they're just little grunts, you know. It's like I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
mad about what type of grunt you make at me. Um, I feel like that kind of leads me into one of the first uh kind of tentpole questions of the show with this question of friendship and connection and you know your song Friendship talks deeply about this, about what it kind of means to be a friend and how to connect. And I'm really curious at a baseline level, the sort of initial question is in your experience, what does it mean to be a friend?
I uh I think I'm a person who uses the word friend a lot more loosely than
Mm,
a lot of people. Like, some people are very like, my friends are like the core humans in my life, and then assign more like acquaintance and uh, coworker
yeah.
to others. But for me, it's just like, we are all anyone that I care about on any level, to me, is a friend.
Mm,
And like, I obviously have like my core people in my life that are always there for good times and bad times, and like a nice core community. But like, being a member of a music community where I'm out at shows all the time and playing, and attending, and there are so many people around that I would never just call them up and be like, hey, you want to go for a walk, go for coffee, have a one-on-one hangout, but I still consider them my friend because I go out and they're like a part of this community that we're all in, and they're familiar faces, and I care about them, and I admire and respect them.
Hmm.
So I consider all those people friends too. Yeah. So for me, it's literally anyone that I care about, which is
Yeah.
very broad, and it's a lot of people.
I mean, I think that's gorgeous, and it feels what's the word I'm looking for? It feels like a really generous way to show up in the world, to give everybody that, right?
Hmm.
I think I've probably made a lot of excuses in my day of why I don't need to offer that kind of empathy, you know, or why I can't, or whatever excuse I come up with, right? You know, when it comes to sort of like, you know, because you mentioned the idea of like you've got that sort of like the art community, the music community, and that's something. Music, I think, is one of the really magic examples of building a community in that way. And I want to talk more about community in a moment, but sort of keeping on the idea of like the individual, the one on one, right? When you think about um someone in your life who's like really maintained a strong bond with you, what are the traits that you notice that really resonate with you, like the way someone gives their connection to you? What are some of those kind of traits that you really treasure?
Hmm. I find the people that I am closest with, I'm the worst person ever at reaching out to folks. I get very caught up just in my own little world, and I love spending time with people, but I'm also equally content just hiding away in this room, which is my bedroom and studio and home office, and I can lock myself in here for a week and not talk to anybody and be happy about it.
Mm.
But the people that I've really maintained connections with over the years are the ones that know that about me and are always like checking in, or like they check in when they haven't heard from me for a while, or are very comfortable reaching out when they need some help, um, or just want to have a quick little hangout. Uh, and there's some people that like I'll go 2-3 years without having any contact with, and then you can get together and it's the exact same
Hmm.
as it ever was. Uh, that's I think those are the most special connections.
That's something I think a lot about, is this idea of like when I use a word like consistency. I was just talking about this with a friend the other day about when I use a word like consistency, sometimes that gets interpreted as like meaning more often, right? Like, oh, it
Mm.
means that you have to always be showing up. And it's like, no, no, no. Consistency just means whatever you can, but doing that consistently. So like if you can only
Mm.
do one hang a year, that's great. I'll see you next year, but let's try and keep it level, right?
Yeah,
And it's like, yeah, because I'm in the same boat of like I'll always take quality over quantity. And yeah, if your capacity is we talk once every decade, then I hope you have a great rest of the 20s. You know,
totally.
um, but do you ever find yourself like, because I'm in a very similar boat where I can like lose days to my, I'm in a similar space where it's like I work from the same desk that I write at, and I, you know, my living room is the same room and all that kind of thing, right? And um do you find yourself I don't want to use the word regretting it, because I don't think I just don't like leaning into that element of it. But like, is there a piece of how you show up for friends that you are trying to adjust to sort of reflect what you like from how your friends show up?
I think one of those things is like the the reaching out side
Mhm.
of things, because there's, let's say, three people in particular in my life that are always reaching out to me, and I appreciate it so much, and I
Mhm.
I am rarely reciprocating that. Like I'm always so down to chat when they text me or call me, but I'm rarely the one that is initiating that conversation.
Mhm.
And knowing how much I appreciate it when it happens, I would definitely like to be the one to strike up the convo. And even just saying that out loud is like a really nice reminder that I should be doing that more often.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what I think that's a piece of what I'm driving at with the whole reframe of the show in general is that I think I'm trying to find more like actionable things that like that very much that I can do, right? And like you just said, hearing it said aloud is so different from thinking it, which is
Hmm.
then a whole nother layer. Like I think awareness is such a vital step. Because you can't change anything you're not aware of, right? And
Yeah.
so I think, yeah. Forgive me if I'm. It sounds like I'm drilling you. I'm not meaning to, right? I
No, not
just,
at all.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. I guess it's
uh,
just nice to think like, if they stopped reaching out, I would miss that connection a lot.
yeah,
And then if I just continued, I love being trapped in my little bubble for a few days at a time, but then I have that call or that hangout and I'm just like so reinvigorated.
exactly.
And if that disappeared, then I would start to feel real sad in this room, I think.
Yeah, big time. Well, you can't. It's that thing. I've always thought about like when I was younger. I used to always think I wanted my art to be my job, right? I always wanted to just like I would just spend all day writing poetry, and that would be my whole life. And the older as the years have gone on, I've realized that that would make such boring art. Like if
Hmm.
all I was doing was just making art, I would have nothing to say really quickly.
Hmm.
You have to be out living. You have to be getting new experiences. You have to be meeting people and just like trying stuff. So you have new stories to tell in the artistic reframe, right? Um,
Yes.
so yeah, that idea of like sometimes being forced. My therapist often does this thing where he talks about like he's like, sometimes you don't want to brush your teeth, but you do it anyway. And sometimes you don't want to see friends, but you do it anyway because that's a piece of your like internal those are your
Hmm.
values is to be connected. So it's like, I've used the excuse so often, especially recently, of like my social battery being low, and so I just like give myself a pass to just stay in and do nothing again, right? And that ends up being such a drain, right?
Hmm.
So kind of forcing yourself out sometimes is a benefit, right?
Yeah, it's like there's always the like introvert, extrovert thing. And like,
Yeah.
I'm right in the middle. So I never
Hmm.
know which way I lean. And I do find like sometimes, uh, staying in is the thing that will recharge me. But oftentimes it is like a meaningful interaction. I think finding like the interactions that you can, if your social battery is low, going out to a noisy, busy bar with a bunch of people, not gonna help
Yeah, yeah,
at all. But going for, I've been trying to do more like coffee hangouts lately,
yeah.
especially in those times where I feel like I don't have a lot to give
Yep.
because you just get real wired on caffeine. It's never more than like an hour.
Yeah,
But just two people just drinking way too much coffee and yapping for an hour
yep.
is a really great way to recharge.
Oh, never. No one should ever underestimate the power of the app. Like that's.
Mhm.
I'm curious. This is sort of like the shadow side of the one-on-one connections, and it's this idea of something that I've been thinking a lot about recently is processing friend breakups. And it's something
Mm.
that we don't often really discuss all that openly and all that publicly, but it is something that pretty much everybody has experienced in one capacity or another, in the same way that pretty much everybody's experienced a breakup in one capacity or another. And we have all this, we have centuries of media discussing the tragedy of lost love, but we have far less discussion of
Mm.
lost friendship.
Mhm.
um, and I'm curious, obviously you don't have to give names or details or anything, but I'm really curious, when the sort of idea of a friendship breakup is mentioned, is there an experience that comes to mind for you, and how did you go about kind of processing through that and healing yourself for it?
Yeah, I'd say I mean, a lot of the ones that I've experienced have just been the like drifting apart, where people's lives change, and I'm such a different person than I was. I used to be like kind of broy when I was like 18, 19. I was like a
Sure.
gym bro. Uh, so loved working out, and my connections that I had were like the guys at the gym. And then when that became less of my life and I gave myself more to art, I just like naturally drifted from those folks.
Yeah.
Uh, but like since that time, I feel like the friendship breakups that I've had have come back around, especially in the last like 2 years. I've had some really meaningful reconnections
Mm.
with people, which has been like such a big lesson in giving second chances.
Hmm.
I think almost everyone does deserve at least a second chance. Third, maybe not as much.
Yeah.
But with the exception of like unforgivable, atrocious acts, I really do feel like people deserve to be given a second chance. And I've experienced this a few times. And every time it's been like one of the most valuable exercises. And now I have these friends back that I deeply care about,
Yeah.
that were just going through a difficult time in their life and took it out in ways that they regret and we all
Mm.
regret. And sometimes people just need a little time to work on their shit. And if people show me, and these people that have shown me that they have put in the time and energy and effort to better themselves as a human and friend, I will always open my arms back up,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
always will.
I think that's beautiful. And you touched on a couple really key points that I think about often is actions, right? Actions above words. And actions, behavior takes time, right?
Hmm.
And so, just having that patience to not I know in my past, I've often been so rushed to solve things, right? And have an answer as quickly as possible, right? And to not be able to kind of tolerate that like uncertainty, and to not be able to tolerate that like that really uncomfortable feeling of like, well, it's going to take the time it takes, and so I better just sit back and do my thing, right? And when you learn to tolerate that and just like give it space to breathe and let people work their shit out and then come back when you're ready, right? um I think that's
Hmm.
wonderful. I'm really glad to hear that you're experiencing that. It also makes me think that like friendships in a way can almost be like, I don't want to call them practice runs, but it's like, because we're sort of socialized to see them as a different type of intimacy. They it gives us a chance to try um almost like alternative connective practices than we normally would with like romantic connections,
Hmm.
and it almost gives us a little bit more space to like experiment with how we connect, right?
Yeah, because we're not putting so much pressure on one individual, which
Exactly.
I think is one of the biggest inherent problems with romantic relationships to begin
Exactly.
with. And that's something, I'm in what I would say the first healthy relationship of my life right now. And I think a lot of the reason why it's so healthy is because we're not putting all of our needs into one human, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well, isn't it just isn't that the truth of like when we're conditioned to believe that one person will hold all the answers, and then when that person turns out to be a human being, and humans are inherently flawed and imperfect and will fuck up and will disappoint you, suddenly we're told, oh, now that person must be a villain because they proved themselves to be a human being, right?
Hmm.
And like, how fucking unhealthy is that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You need the space to be your own self too. Uh So what inspired you to start this project and podcast in the beginning when you were like going friend by friend on Facebook?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love that question. Thank you. Yeah, in a way, I've talked about it a bit on the show in that, like, it really did start as a joke. Like it was like I just wanted to start a podcast, and I didn't know. I still don't know famous people, so I couldn't do like a interview show
Mm,
with celebrities to like get views, and at the same time too, I fucking hate Facebook, and so I was like, what a good marriage to like get to talk to people. It doubles back to what we're talking about like I'm the same way of like I'm a really bad reach outer, and so it was like a bit of a cheat code for me in a way to like get to
hmm.
talk to all the people I wanted to talk to over the years, but never had an excuse to. And so and
Amazing.
so I would have this reason of like, hey, let's talk for an hour, but over the years, what's maintained my engagement with it is because the show like kind of morphed itself into this like um I had a friend once describe it as freelance anthropology work, you know, like it's essentially this like or maybe it was sociology. I can't remember the term she used, but it's become this like this inadvertent study of connection and friendship and how we connect to each other and why we maintain connections, um and I am somebody who has really gone up and down with how I connect and how I maintain connections, and so to sort of always have this show in the back burner, I'm not always consistently producing, I'm not always consistently doing it, but it's always, it's been in my life now. It's for in some capacity for 7 years, and it's always been something I can come back to yeah, rebuild connections, build new connections, meet new people, hear new stories from old people,
Hmm.
and especially I think in the last couple of years when I've reframed it to really look at friendship and to sort of remove the Facebook element of it. Um, that coupled just with my own personal mental health journey and my own kind of like therapizing of myself and all the work I've been doing there has really blended together to like kind of help me almost like enact or like put into practice the stuff that I talk about in therapy.
Hmm.
So rather than just like sitting and talking and having it be theory, I get to actually like enact it.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's been really helpful. It's been really, for me at least. I don't know
Yeah.
about listeners, but
I mean, you if you're not doing things for yourself, then what is the point?
really though, at the end of the day, that's kind of what it boiled down to. And it's like this show has never been for me about like I've never had aspirations of like being Mark Maron, like I've never wanted it to be like number one on the charts. I've never wanted it to be anything like that. I've really loved its kind of like underground vibes of just like it's just a nobody talking to people,
Hmm.
and um I like that energy of like it's very guests don't bring pretension with them, and they have nothing to prove because they're just chatting with a friend,
Hmm.
so it's like it's very low it's not taxing for people, right?
Yeah. We also touched a bit on friendship breakups, and I'm
Mm.
wondering if in your early conversations when you were trying to go through everyone in your list, did you have to have any challenging conversations with people who you had experienced either a friendship or romantic breakup with?
Yeah, at the start, I just didn't ask them on the show. you know, I just avoided
That's
them, right?
fair. Yeah.
Yeah. But what I did over the years is that as I did start to shift the show, um, to be a little less loaded because I did realize in retrospect like it's a little aggressive to be like, hey, I haven't talked to you in 10 years, come on my show so I can unfriend you, right? Like if you're looking at it just from the kind of like elevator pitch, it's like a little intense. um and especially for people from those kind of eras of my life, I was, I was undiagnosed, I was unmedicated, I was untherapized, I was just out there raw in the world, just letting my like dysregulation freak flag fly, right? And so I have to imagine I was remembered as quite a chaotic character in a lot of people's life, right? So for me to then show up 10 years later and be like, no, I swear I've changed, wasn't always the easiest sales pitch, right? But as the years have gone on and I've been able to kind of show who I am, um, I've definitely become more interested in getting those kinds of guests on. Um, I've yet to have even now, I've yet to have like the real heavy hitters, just because it's like I'm at a stage in my life where I'm like, I don't need to talk to you, so I don't want
Yeah,
to, right?
yeah,
Even
which
though
is
it
also
would be,
fair.
yeah, right. It's like I almost kind of missed the sweet spot
Hmm.
of what I could have done it, but at this point, it's like it wouldn't be beneficial for me, and I don't care what they have to say, so why would
Hmm.
I, right? But I did end up having a couple over the years. I've had a couple exes on, and those have actually always been really fun because it's always just been like, oh yeah, there's a reason why we connected, and there's also a reason why we aren't connected now, But it is always reassuring to know there isn't like uh, long simmering vitriol still there, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. We all after a breakup, I feel like people try to rationalize it by like remembering the worst parts of a human.
yep.
But it is nice to be like, oh yeah, we connected because we're just two people that get along.
Yeah, that's just it. And it's funny actually that it's really like in my experience and in a lot of like what I've read, especially quite recently. I went through a breakup kind of recently, and so I was doing another round of like, how do you deal with that? And a lot of the advice is like, don't fixate on the good stuff. Let yourself remember the bad stuff. Let yourself
Hmm.
remember why it ended. And I think that that's a really important step at the beginning to like keep yourself from take me back, baby,
Yeah,
right? Whatever
totally.
that bullshit, right? But it's also really important to let that stuff go at a certain point too, right? And like you say, to remember, it's like people are people, and like, sure, the relationship didn't work. That doesn't make either of you a monster. That just means you weren't a match, right? And I
Hmm.
think that's so much healthier to just be like, yeah, bad fit,
Yeah,
have a good life, right?
yeah.
Um,
I mean, sometimes some people
oh,
are monsters. That does happen.
100%. Yes, yes. I'm speaking contextually of like when it's
Right.
just a breakup. It's the
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
That we've been talking predominantly about the idea of the one-on-one connection, and you did touch on it already. So I wanted to kind of like tease it out a little bit more now because from that one-on-one you then start building out community, right? You
Hmm.
start adding one on two and three on three and and suddenly you have a room of people, right? And community is another one of those really like uh what's the word? It's a very like it's almost like a mirage of a word in that it feels very self-explanatory until you actually start picking at it.
Hmm.
And it's another one that can be interpreted personally in so many different ways. And so I'm curious for you, what does the word community mean, and how do you sort of hold or maintain a community for yourself?
I feel like community is a group of people that have a shared purpose.
Mm.
Um, so the community that I've been lucky to be a part of is the music community, especially in Calgary where I live. Uh, and it's a really easy community to be a part of because the shared purpose is just enjoying music and supporting local artists and having a great time together.
Mm.
And it's such a great thing that has come together. It comes together so naturally because you meet these people that are just going to all the same shows and the same venues and get to know people over time through that. Uh, and I've been in the music community for what feels like my entire life now, but it's been pretty much most of my adult life, especially the last like 12 years. And I love seeing all the same people that have been there from the start, or welcoming new people into the fold, and really encouraging like new bands and things like that. So I never have to go to church. So I never really understood what church was about until I started to really appreciate how important community is. And
Hmm.
I think it's great that it exists to have that, but I'm glad that my church is going to see rock and roll shows.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. You know, I love that description of it because that's very much my experience of it too. I went to see Stars. This is probably a couple months ago now. And they I had this sort of epiphany moment because you know they were doing their like it was like the 20-year anniversary of Set Yourself on Fire, and they did this thing where the last song of the album they played it a cappella. They didn't have any instruments, but they had the entire room sing the song together. So it was the entire, you know, Commodore all singing this song. And yeah, it was spiritual. Like it was so like eh, spiritually nourishing for me, you know?
Hmm.
And it was like yeah, it was a religious experience and made me realize I wasn't raised with any kind of religion at all and the moments I've had, what you could describe as either like a patriotic moment or a spiritual moment, have all involved music, you know, and especially Canadian music, you know, and I think
Mm.
that's where like you know I think we're really blessed to have a really incredible music culture. You know, Calgary is just a hotspot of incredible talent and incredible art, um, yeah, it's amazing the power of just people all singing together in a room. You know, it's like yeah, like
Yeah,
you say, no wonder people love church. You know,
yeah, yeah. I think music is great because you watch a band who's like letting their guard down entirely and being so vulnerable and sharing their deepest feelings, and I think it makes a room full of people see that that is okay
hmm.
to do. So I find people are often at their best. I love connecting with people at shows. That's pretty much what I do for fun. Like
Hmm.
that's the only. I also love that you only have to talk to people for like 5 minutes in between the show, and
Yeah,
then because like, oh, I'm watching. Sorry, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
just enough time.
yeah, yeah, and yeah. If you really latched onto a boring one, you're like, oh, well, don't worry, it's over, right? You know.
Yeah, yeah. The shared vulnerability that people
Yeah.
feel allowed to feel, I think, creates for some really special connections and moments.
Yeah. Well, and doesn't that comes back, you know, that spurs my mind on to thinking about the idea of like modeling, right? You know, and how like we don't always know, you know, I always think about how like, you know, babies aren't born knowing how to fart, right? Like they literally can't coordinate their stomach muscles to fart.
Mm,
And so they have to be like helped, you know? And it's why they like scream, you know, one of the reasons is because like they're in pain because they don't realize they can just fart, you know? And to us
mm.
it's like, oh, it's so simple, just, you know, but they have to be shown how, you know?
And
And
then told later that it's wrong.
you right.
As soon as you learn how to do it,
Yeah, then we come in and you know that Anglo Christian shame comes into play, and you
yeah.
know, right? Yeah, we ruin one of the best things our bodies does, you know. But it is, but it's this idea of like, you know, we're not born knowing how to connect properly. We're not born
Mm,
knowing how to be friends or how to be in love or how to fart. Like we have to be shown everything, and that's okay. That's a beautiful thing. Like we're a communal monkey, right?
mhm,
But being shown vulnerability is such a healing act, because sometimes you don't even realize that you're not being vulnerable until you see someone do it, right?
mhm,
And then you go, "Oh shit, I want to do that," you know. Um, and that's you know, I mean, to me, that's one of the key magic tricks of art, right?
I
Is
agree.
exactly what you're talking about, right? When it comes to the idea of vulnerability within community, that's a really that's a question that I've been really stuck on for a really long time. And I'm curious about your experience. You know, you're touching on it now about the idea of like being vulnerable within your art. And maybe you can tie it into some of the stuff you've been writing about. But I'm curious about that personal experience of witnessing vulnerability or of presenting vulnerability, and how has that been sort of received by the community,
Mm,
um because in my experience there's been so many times, I think we look at it from a sort of social perspective, and it's like vulnerability is kind of shamed away from us, and we're supposed to be like tough, big, tough, strong, and in
hmm
my experience the biggest strength, the biggest power is to be vulnerable, right?
Yeah. And it's also what allows for authentic connection
Mhm.
to happen. If you're always putting on a front, no one's ever going to know who you really are.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I feel like the only way to really make friends and make connection and find community is to let your guard down. And
Mhm.
uh, which is another thing that I should probably work on. I feel like I've established myself in a place in communities and friend groups as like the happy guy
Mhm.
when like usually I'm deeply in pain.
Yeah.
But usually when I go out, it's because I am in a great mood. So people see this one side, and I think
Mhm.
that's why those like core friendships are so important, because the people that
Mhm.
are in the I like to call them peripheral friends,
Mhm.
they only usually see the best side of you.
Mhm.
Uh, and there's many sides to everyone. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I've been trying to like work on that. The question I hate the most in the entire world is how are you?
Yeah.
It like it's and the more I think about how much I hate it, the more I just don't even know what to do. And it's like
Yeah.
because everyone's just, "Hey, how are you?"
Yep.
And then, "Good, you?" So I've been really trying to stop saying good.
Mhm. Mhm. It's so funny. It's something that I try to address so often on this show. I try my best not to open up the conversation with that. It ends up usually happening anyway because it's just a tick. But a guest of mine last year introduced me to, instead of saying "How are you," you ask, "What's bringing you joy this week?"
Mm,
And just as a way to sort of flip it. And it's like, yeah, we're still going to look at something positive.
yeah.
It's not saying there isn't negative, but it's saying right now for a second we're going to look at a positive. And it doesn't lead to that exact same stock answer, like you say, because it's like if you ask how I am, I'm like, well, how real do you want me to be?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
right?
That's the thing. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, when people do ask that, so if I'm feeling shitty, I'm like, honestly, I'm stressed.
Yeah, yeah. And that's even I mean, that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful to be honest about it, right? and
hmm
and and I think there's a piece of like, I think we're taught to be sort of afraid of that answer because we're also supposed to be like offering solutions to each other. And maybe
Mm,
this is like, maybe this is like an experience for like people who had a boyhood where it's like, I think boys are conditioned to be in control, and they're conditioned to be the answer giver and the solution maker. And so if I was to say, "How are you?" and you were to say stressed, I would be socialized to be like, what am I going to do about that? That must be
right.
somehow now my responsibility, right? When it's like, in fact, what you could just say is like, oh, that sucks. I'm really sorry to hear that. That sounds
Yeah.
hard. Would you like help with that, or do you
hmm
want to just be hurt? Right? Like you don't. But we're conditioned to take on each other's emotions, so instead we're taught to like repress those feelings because we don't want to share difficult or hard to hold emotions, right?
hmm Yeah. That what you just said was like the most important thing that I learned from my own therapy journey is stop trying to fix everyone. Sometimes people just want to be validated. So I've stopped
Mm-hmm.
being like, "Oh, it's going to be okay." That's something that I have removed
Yeah.
through it took a lot of training
Oh yeah.
to stop saying that and just
Yep.
say, "Yeah, oh yeah, that does suck."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of the most powerful moments in therapy or with my friends or just in general in my life have been those moments where either I've said it to someone or someone has said it to me, where it's just been like, wow, that sucks. And you're like, yeah, it does.
Mhm.
Right? And that's all I wanted to hear. I just wanted to
Totally.
say, right? Like I don't want a solution. I just want to be heard, right?
Mhm.
Um And isn't that like such a core facet of, friendship, of community, of connection, of blah, 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 but um um I'm clocking the time here, and I just want to make sure I'm not rushing through the end. But before I kind of get to, I've just got kind of like one or two kind of last questions for you. But before we launch into that, I really do want to say, Brett, like, thank you, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, and just, you're someone who, we were saying this before recording, but I really wanted to just like gush for a second, because it's like, you were someone who we met so randomly,
Hmm.
and but there was such a genuine spark of like respect and of admiration
Yeah.
and of just like interest. Like you were so easy to talk to and connect to, and you've remained someone who I've seen pop up here and there throughout my various feeds through the years, and I'm always just like so excited to see you doing well, and I love the new music. I've been playing that friendship song for months now. I absolutely love
Thank
it.
you.
I just think it's fantastic. And I can't wait to see what you do next, because I know whatever it is, it's gonna rule, so I really do want to say thank you, and yeah, I think you're amazing.
Man, the feeling is so mutual. And I think about, it's funny, like all these people that you meet in through life, and
Yeah.
like you were definitely a person that like I drove you home from the shuttle or whatever, and we just
Yeah.
talked, just said so many words per minute, which is like
Yeah.
not that's not typical of me to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
uh and so yeah, I think about you often,
Yeah.
and it's crazy that we met and that this is happening. And yeah, I've been waiting a long time to be asked to come on this show. So
I mean, I'm so glad we can make it work. I really am,
me
and,
too.
it's such a funny thing. It's that weird intersection of technology and then human behavior, of like, yeah, you're somebody I've wanted on the show for ages, but I've always been like, oh no, he's busy, he's a cool musician guy,
Mm.
and so to hear like you've been like sitting here waiting is just so funny to me, but bunch of fucking dorks over here, but um, um this last kind of like tentpole question is something that I've been fiddling with a little bit throughout my recent interviews, and it really stems from this idea of like the world, it feels very dark these days, with just like everything that's happening, with the way the news works, with the way social media works, with the way just like politics are working, and the environment and everything. It just feels like there's just such a weight on everything,
Hmm.
and I saw somebody post the other day about this idea of like we still have to do stuff even without hope, and how it's like
Hmm.
okay to not have hope, because we should still do it. And I really do push back on that, because I don't find hope to be delusional, and I don't find hope to be uh misplaced emotion. I think it's a really beautiful thing to allow yourself to be hopeful, and to allow yourself to, even in the middle of darkness, to allow yourself to feel some glimmer of joy.
Hmm.
And so I'm really curious for you, what is something that's been either giving you hope, or what gives you hope for, getting out of bed tomorrow. you know
Yeah. It can really be hard to find, for sure.
hmm
Uh, for me, the thing that keeps me going, and I feel so fortunate to have, is creating music. And I am just trying to build my entire life around that, and um and doing it as much as I possibly can, and removing the things in my life that are not that, so that even when everything is fucked up, I still have individual purpose. 'Cause it's we're not programmed to feel the weight of the world. We're programmed
hmm
to feel maybe the burden of 20 people around us from
Yeah,
our little,
tops. Yeah.
yeah, from a small community, and now we see all the bad things happening everywhere, and it's
Mm.
entirely overwhelming. And I think sometimes you do have to not think about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've definitely found just like giving myself fully to music and art has allowed me to keep going.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful. Last little question before we get to the plugs. Um, um, I always love to leave listeners on a little bit of an actionable thing that they can try out. So, what do you think is one thing listeners could try doing this week to be a more effective friend, either to themselves or to their community?
I think based on the lessons that I've learned, I think people should reach out to that person that they miss having in their life. That person that, whether they had a falling out or just kind of drifted, but they're still on their mind, just reach out. Even if it's like, my favorite little easy entry is when someone posts something on their Instagram story and just like responding to it in a way that kind of opens more conversation. Yeah,
I
that's my challenge.
Yeah, I love that one. I fully co-sign that one, and I'm with you too. I love when somebody posts something on their Instagram that I can reply to because I'm like, oh
Hmm.
yes, here's an in, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, and it often makes for some great little chats.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, thank you one more time. This has been just so lovely chatting with you and hearing your stories. Where can listeners find you, and like where would you like listeners to find you?
So basically anywhere, social media, Brett Cassidy music on all of the places. And my first EP, a selection of ballads from the Old Man River, is on Spotify.
Awesome, awesome. And the links for all that will be in the show notes. Brett, you're amazing. Keep it up. And
You're amazing. Thank you.
oh no, thanks.
Let's connect in person one of these days.
I would absolutely love that. We
Me
absolutely
too.
will. Yeah, awesome.
Awesome.
And that's it. Thanks again to Brett for coming on the show. It was just such a treat catching up with him. I had to leave in that last little closer because I just thought it was so funny that we both did the same. Awesome. Just, you could take the boy out of Berta, but be sure to give him a follow and see if he is playing in a city near you. I know he is doing some touring around the country, so if you can do it, check him out. He's fantastic. I've also included links to his music, so give him some streams on whatever preferred music platform of your choice, or even better, why not go out and buy the record, right? Was that Will Smith who said that? I can't remember. Anyway, you're going to find all that information, all those links in the show notes. And while you're there, why not sign up for the monthly Friendless newsletter? Once a month, you're going to be getting a free curated list of recommendations. There's of movies, books, music, whatever else is bringing me joy that month. There's also going to be resources you may want to check out if you want to learn more about some of the topics that come up in certain episodes. Things like DBT, community building, just general brain healing tools. There's also exclusive writing by yours truly, along with sneak peeks at my other creative projects, other things, whatever's coming down the pipeline. All that and so much more. It's absolutely packed. I really have no excuse why I'm not charging you for it, but hey, here we are. So sign up today. You have no excuse. But that is going to do it for me this week, so let's wrap things up here. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to catch you back here next time. But hey, I'm not going to worry about that right now, and neither should you, because that is then, and this is now. So for now, I'll just say I love you, and I wish you well. Fun and safety, sweet peas.